Hello. Every year I hear about people putting their garden to bed for the winter, and it makes me a bit sad because, well, they're missing out. And so in today's video I'm going to show you some of the things that I do and that I don't do at this time of year to prepare not only my garden, the wildlife, but also myself for the winter. Now, when I'm thinking about what will be good for the garden, I actually need to think what will be good for every living thing in this entire space. And that means taking care of the soil, taking care of all the plants, taking care of the volume of water, everything I can to protect and to help this garden is going to be a good thing. So enough of all the philosophical and all the reasons why. Here's what I actually do. Now's the time that I take tender plants into undercover. And this agapanthus, whilst it's hardy and will cope with some pretty low temperatures, I don't want the root ball to freeze outside, so I'm just taking it in for a tiny bit of protection. If you grow dahlias and you live in a very cold or a very wet environment like we do, now is a good time to lift the tubers and store them for the winter. I'll be doing this later in the week. I'll lift the tubers, have a look to see if there's any damaged and soft parts, and I'll take those away. Now you can divide your tubers, making sure that you still have an eye on each part. I'm actually going to keep this as one really big plant, and I'll take cuttings in the spring as it starts to regrow to increase my stock, because actually I really like this flower. Plants with hollow stems like fennel and dill I will leave uncut. I'll leave them as they are. There's a number of reasons for this. There may still be some seeds on the seed heads, although not with this fennel, which birds can eat, and insects can overwinter very safely in these hollow stems. And if I cut these stems now, well, I've taken away the potential home for a whole host of insects that could be beneficial for the garden next year. If I have empty spaces in beds, or I have new beds that I've started to prepare, like this one, then I will mulch them. So I started making this bed and filling it late summer, early autumn. I dumped a load of plants in it that I potted on. I'm just going to pull the weeds out of those as I'm here. There we go. And when I made this bed, I filled it with a whole load of composted manure. But that obviously had a lot of weed seeds in it, and lots of them have started to germinate. And so for the winter, I'm going to take out things like dock leaves that will really establish themselves regardless of what I do. And I'm going to put all of these seedlings into a bucket that's filled with water so that they actually rot down, rather than putting them in a compost heap where they could re-establish themselves. And then I'm going to cover this with cardboard and some compost over the top of it. So I'm either going to use bought-in multi-purpose compost like this one, or I'm going to use a homemade compost like I have in this compost bin. This is the first compost heap I made in this garden, and it's slow composting method, so I'll just put everything in there and leave it to rot down. And it's now been a year and a bit since I put the last thing in it, and all of this year it has been busy growing nasturtiums and tomatoes that the seeds were in the compost. But here we go. It's not a huge amount of compost, but this bin wasn't completely full, but I'm very happy with what's there and to be able to move that into the raised bed. Unlike the manure that's already in the bed, this compost heap has been covered for most of the time that it's been here, and I was careful not to put weed seeds into this heap. So I shouldn't be transferring any weed seed into the new bed. Any of this compost that I don't use in the bed today, I'll cover back over so that the rain doesn't wash all the nutrients out, so that weed seeds don't land in it, and to protect it from the wind throughout the winter months. Now I know that there are loads of nasturtium seeds and probably tomato seeds and borage seeds in this, but that's fine. They're all plants I'm quite happy to have growing in the raised bed. I've also noticed that I put in some cardboard boxes that still had their cellophane sticky stuff on them, so I need to take that out and dispose of that permanently in the bin. You know, one of the things that I often talk about is when you get a chance to put your compost heaps at the top of a hill, so that when you're bringing out a wheelbarrow load of compost from it, you're going downhill. Even just a short slope uphill could be quite tiring. So on top of my homemade compost, I'm also going to add that bag of bought-in compost. You don't need to do this. Homemade compost will have a huge array of nutrients in it. But I don't want this bag to sit around in the polytunnel. It does get pretty wet in there. This is just going to go sour, shut in a bag. So might as well use it out here. Now is a great time to take cuttings of perennial kales. They actually root very easily in cooler weather. All you need to do is choose your stem. I think I'll go with that one. Cut it off and then remove the largest leaves. You can do that just by bending them backwards carefully, and they should come away from the stem. Now you want to leave enough leaf at the top for it to be able to photosynthesize, but not so much that there's lots and lots of water evaporation and stressing the plant. And then that is your ideal cutting. You can push it straight into the ground or around the edge of a pot. They will root even in cool weather. And it won't be very many weeks before you see roots coming out of the pot and new growth appearing. They don't need hormone rooting powder, they just need to be pushed gently around the edge of a pot. I haven't packed the compost in here, so the stems will go in easily. And then I'm going to firm the compost around each stem. Give it a little water. And then I'm going to place it outside the polytunnel, because these will root perfectly happily outside, and don't forget to label them. I continue to gather seeds, and some of which I will take in and harvest and save inside, and others I will sprinkle on the ground. I also like to leave the seed heads of lots of perennial plants. This is an echinacea, and I leave them because the seeds provide food for birds and small mammals right through the winter, and to some extent leaving all this growth on will protect the crown throughout the winter. And I'll continue to harvest things like beetroot, anything that's going to get eaten by our local vole population. I'll continue to harvest these over the next few weeks. Yum! And having prepared this bed, I could just leave it like this, maybe put another layer of card over it for the winter, but why not use it? Why not use this space productively? And so here I have a bulb of garlic. I'm just going to separate out the cloves, and I plant the garlic with the flat end downwards and the pointy end up. The flat end is a root basal plate, and that's where the roots will come from, and the pointy end is where the shoot will come from and grow upwards. Now garlic likes 4 to 6 inches apart and in each direction, and so I'm going to be able to plant 2, maybe 3 entire bulbs of garlic in this bed to grow away quietly during the rest of the autumn and the winter months, and then in the spring, and this will be ready to harvest at some time towards the end of June, during July, or maybe the very early of August. Now I'm happy with the spacing. I'm actually going to plant them. So I'm planting them so there is about that much compost on top of them, which in reality means that the base of the compost is pretty much sitting on the cardboard. And with each one, I'm checking that I've got the flat end downwards. There we go. Cover all of those up. And then I'll just continue across the rest of the bed. There we go. I gather together my hand tools and store them. I keep them just out here, but if you have wooden handled tools, it's worth putting those inside to protect the wood from the elements. Otherwise you can end up weakening the wood and the handles can end up breaking. And I also continue to harvest herbs to take into the kitchen, and some of them I chop and put into ice cube trays with some water and freeze. And others, like rosemary, bay and winter savoury, I will dry and I'll either hang up in the kitchen, or when they're completely dry, I will store in jars. And now is also a good time to sow seeds of some herbs in pots to grow on your kitchen windowsill. Things like chive and parsley will grow really well, and you can also take cuttings of mint if you still have any top growth. That will grow away in water on your windowsill very easily. And if not, you can still lift a few roots from your mint plant and take those in, pop them into some water or into soil, and because of the warmth in your house, that should grow through the winter for you too. Now these won't give you huge volumes of fresh herbs right through the winter, but how nice to have a few to use on special occasions. I have a handful of herbs that I consider my absolute essentials, and if you want to see what those are, I'll leave a link in the video description and also on screen, and if you click on that link, it'll take you straight through to that video.